Good morning. Well, I became, I guess, one of the spokesmen for the group. I will share a little bit of my personal experience, but a lot of what I say, I think and hope that I'm representative of what the group saw and experienced as well. But you're going to hear from two more people, Ashley and Cameron, as soon as I'm done. So let me start by saying this was a new experience for me. I've always wanted to go on a mission trip, but always thought maybe it'd be a medical mission because I've been in healthcare for over 40 years. So God had a surprise for me, had a different experience in mind for me. You're seeing some pictures on the screen as we scroll through, and it's representative of how Caritas Foundation supports the many projects they partner with. We spend our time listening and learning from each staff and from those workers, students, and community members they serve. Our leader of the team, Dr. Jen, as I said before, wanted me to talk to all of you about how I experienced the retreat in our group and as a neighbor to those we met. But a little background. When you see some of these pictures, you'll see some faces maybe you don't recognize. And one of them is sitting in the congregation today with her mask on behind Jim and Phyllis, and that's Linda, who's a professor from Westchester University. And she's a longtime friend of Eric, the director of Caritas, and she and two of her research assistants, seniors at Westchester University, also joined us. And Linda and Eric's son, Roberto, they were all instrumental in our language barrier because they were our translators for us when we met with the groups that we met with. So at breakfast each day, Jen, as our leader, she would usually center us for the day with a devotion. And during our bus ride, Eric would give us background on the program we were visiting that day and answer our many questions. Pastor Bob would spend time with our group in the evening, and he would do a debriefing session, so he would help us process what we'd seen, what we'd heard that day, what we'd learned, in order to understand what God was up to, not only with our neighbors in Mexico, but as he just said, how we can apply what we learned in ministry to our neighbors beyond the walls of St. John's, both here in Boyertown and around the world. We all learn from our neighbors by listening to their stories, through hands-on experience working with them, the joy of learning through games and play, and the sharing of the meals they prepared for us. In my observations, there were many more similarities than differences between us as they shared genuine hospitality with love and a passion for what they are doing to lift up another. It made me realize we are all working on the same goals of loving God and loving all people. So I returned to St. John's with a commitment and am excited to see where God is leading us in ministry to love and serve all. Who's next?
Me. Good morning. I wanted to start off by saying that I'm so grateful that I was able to go on this trip and have the opportunities that I had. Mrs. Blake mentioned Eric and his son Roberto also joined us while visiting the organizations. Roberto is really involved in our nightly debriefs, and on the final night, we met by a campfire to have a final debrief, to think and talk about the whole trip. Roberto said many things throughout the trip that stuck with me, but when he said this, it made me think of the church. He said, "The biggest way that God shows himself being present with us is love. Every time you love, God is there. It's God's way of being God." This really resonated with me because loving God and loving all people had been our mission here at church. During this trip, I learned that no matter how different anyone here is from you, it doesn't mean you shouldn't treat them any differently. Some of you also may have heard from my mom that I wish to live there when I'm older. The beauty of the country is clearly a bonus, but the main reason was the community. Everyone would say good morning to you no matter if you passed that same person 15 times that morning. Everybody was so kind and proud of the things that they had, even if it wasn't what we consider a lot. The beauty of the people is what made me feel so at ease. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I can't wait to go back.
Good morning. It's hard to sum this trip all up into one speech, mostly because there was so much to think about, learn, and do while in Mexico. But the thought of having to write it all down and explain it was overwhelming. But I think what was most important for me was learning from others. Throughout this trip, I learned about purpose, community, differences, and how although we have differences, we still share something in common. The groups we met started off making me feel worried. I felt extremely bad for not knowing Spanish, but it was incredible how quickly we got over that barrier and began to understand each other, although we could not speak the same language. We did this by playing games and remembering to have fun. This stood out to me because no matter where we went or who we were with, we were laughing. And it happened to be our common thing among all of us, which was so meaningful to me. Quickly, everyone I was with on this trip and had met began to become my community and neighbors, and still are. I might even say that our group felt like family to me by our last night in debrief. This trip showed me to not fear differences or to let them hold me back from becoming friends with someone. I think the purpose of many of the groups we met was to teach us and help us to share something in common, to put aside our differences, become a community, and of course, remember to play and have fun. Something I found while in Mexico that really helped me understand and realize all of this was something written on the wall inside the cafe called resilience. It said, capacity of a community to adapt and overcome adverse situations in a positive way. Of course, this was in Spanish, so I didn't understand this at first, but once I got it translated, I think everything we were being taught and shown made a lot more sense.
You heard her quote. I'm not even sure she knows. Two of the most powerful leaders in the United States, Heifetz and Linsky. She just defined the title of adaptive leadership. You spoke here while people spend $25,000 to spend 3 days at the Kennedy School of Leadership. What grade are you in? Ninth grade. Go to Harvard and become a ninth grader, if you're lucky.